to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Alderman Rucker.
Here.
Alderman Rose. Here. Alderman Ross.
Say Ross.
Ross.
I'm here, sorry.
Alderman Osteen.
Here.
Alderman Becker.
Here.
Alderman Schuman. Here. Mayor Harmison.
Here. All right, no unfinished business, no new business. I'm gonna turn it over to Gina Woods, please.
So tonight we have transportation, water, sewer, and both airports. But two things that I handed out if you want to discuss those ahead of that, or if you want to do the schedule. One is the engineering services that I promised you kind of a side-by-side. The one piece that I said last night that is still to be determined is really to do a true cost analysis that compares the classification of employees or positions that we've been billed for. So that is still to come, but right now that is a synopsis of what we spent in 21, percentage of construction projects, what we've spent in 2022 or estimated, we've still got a couple months, but based on projects, and then what's loaded in or outlined in your budget, because a lot of those construction projects are construction and engineering as well as general fund. Now, I did make one error. On the general fund, I had put 300,000 in 18, and that should be 2. So that was, I overestimated that. But the point I really wanted to make that gives you something, and then in the probably next week, hopefully we'll have that data and we can get more of an hour comparison for you as we move forward on that. Any questions, or if I've got it correct, what missing information to further that discussion?
So your notes on number 2 says is recommended at 5.3%. That's what's in the budget now, is that
Oh,
right?
I'm sorry.
Which page you up? Come on.
I'm sorry,
Is that
I was
where we're
on
at?
the next page. Sorry, that's an
Engineering?
HR. Yes,
Oh, we're on the engineering.
okay, I apologize.
My mistake, sorry, okay.
So yeah, so the piece that I'm missing here, cost comparisons for true, like what we're paying outsourced, what we're paying in-source, really needs an analysis on the classification of hours billed, which Dave, Jessica, we are waiting on that information, so we'll do that a little further, but just based on what we already track, this is what, just the cost in total, doesn't give you the breakdown. As a percentage of capital expenditures, and I did total capital expenditures just to do a cost center across the board, obviously not all capital expenditures tied to engineering, but it had to be something based, some kind of baseline. That can be further broken down to the capital that actually is tied directly to engineering. And with more time, I can do that as well. So more information will come to further that discussion, but I wanted to get you something tonight that could add aid to your discussion.
Okay.
So the HR, so Cindy had put out that letter. Also, we had CBIZ recommendations. So I took it a little further after listening to the comments and discussion that took place last week. Couple things. One, we briefly talked about this, but I really want to keep the merit matrix the same for consistency. Last year we did that and then just added a premium to get where we wanted to be. That way you're not changing ordinances every year, and we can analyze the merit matrix, as we need to each year. So I went back with the same philosophy we did last year, but still the same end result. So it is the goal to maintain the current, it is the goal to keep up with the economic market, to keep the pay plan adjustment recommendation per CBIZ at a total of 5.3. Now, if you notice on my A option, total increase 5.7, so I can move those fractions around if it's like making it 5.3. But also a further recommendation that I did find in CBIZ's correspondence to Cindy was because of marketability, to keep competitive, as well as to continue to address compression, they recommended a minimum of 6.5. So that's why I played with the numbers, and B gives you a 6.6. And it kind of tells you based on what's already in draft one and how much extra that would add. Either one, it does move up to 60 to 70% of employees through the pay plan very quickly, which is still a goal. Kevin, I'm still going to get you the details on position data. I just didn't have time to get that by tonight, so I will still get that. So either one of them, I think, in theory, meets our intent. It piggybacks to what the premium we did last year to continue that, and we did state last year it may take 2 years. And then next year, depending on what the economic conditions are, you know, there may or may not be a premium, or it may make sense on the metric. So I'd like your direction or what to do in draft 2, or your comfort level.
Gina, can you clarify the recommended 6.5% is recommended by?
So CVIZ always gives us, CVIZ is our consultant that did our compensation plan last year. And he is recommending that the entire plan move 5.3, I think it was. But he also, a disclaimer on that, we also don't know what the market's still gonna do. So instead of moving the floor and the ceiling and figuring out what employees are affected by that, because you're not really changing the employees' quartiles by doing that, you're just changing the floor and the ceiling, so where you're laying, you're ultimately then bringing some down. To get the same dollar result, just increase the employees, hence premium. So overall, merits plus whatever premium, you can still get to that 5.3. In this case, 5.7, because I didn't really do too much of a fraction of percentages. To take that further, then they did recommend, because the competitiveness is still pretty strong, a minimum of 6.5 would keep us, you know, most competitive and still address the compression, which is what the premiums, the idea of the premium. Does that answer your question?
It sure does.
So I'm gonna ask some questions that I'm not sure why. I apologize, but I'm not tracking, okay? Number 2 says play transjust is 5.3, but what's in the budget is line A. Is that right?
No, line A is option A and option B. That second line where it says salaries, all funds, draft 1, that's the dollar amount in the budget, which does come out to, I think it was 3.2%, so it was a little low. I mean, it was lower than the 5.3.
Based on our recommendation, that's what the increase is.
Okay, on top of what's we're currently looking at?
Yes.
Yeah.
In here. Okay. Because this goes back, and I was trying to find it, Cindy's email that kind of said, hey, here's what we've done, and here's what our options are. And you're showing us what the cost of the other 2 options are.
Right, so the option that's in the budget is what my recommendation, and Cindy did go above and beyond that. She said, you know, I still think we gotta be more aggressive.
Okay, but your recommendation is which, is it on here?
Yeah, A or B, to meet what you guys, what we discussed, and what I felt like their intent was to be not the most conservative to get people through the plan, but what do we do to continue what we did last year?
So
So,
we ask the question this way then. If, based on this draft, if we approve, if we say we like A, whatever, okay, does that mean we're adding $204,000 more in the personnel?
yes,
Okay,
for all funds. I don't have a breakdown of what funds are.
and that overall number is around 3 point, what did you say?
3.2% is what currently is the net effect of what currently is in the budget.
And the consultant recommended 6.5.
No less than 6.5, but a minimum 5.3.
And so would this 204,000 affect every single employee?
Yes, all full-time employees, part-times go
So
through.
it's not by quartile or anything like that? It's
Part-time would still get premium.
Okay, well, we can pull it right now, let's leave it. Full-time employees Does that mean they're all gonna get it? No, wait a minute.
They're all gonna get it
They're all gonna get 4%.
In addition to the merit.
on top of wherever they would fall in their merit matrix.
I don't know what other folks think, and I have no problem with people getting raises where we can afford them, but I would like to see that the lower end of the structure be a higher percentage, a higher end of the structure. So if I'm an employee and I'm at the upper end of the quartile ranges, okay, I would like to see a lower percent. First of all, it's a bigger base, okay? Okay. And second of all, I'd like to see us find a way to move the lower two quartiles, very minimum, up at a faster speed. Does that make sense?
So the first part of that question or statement, we do. So when I say the average merit is 2.6, that's averaging whether you're in the first, second, third, or fourth.
Okay,
It still staggers the lower quartile you're in, the higher your percentage. The further quartile you're in, the lower percentage. That
for
is
the
not,
merit only, or for the adjustment only, but not for the merit. Is that what you're saying?
no,
Is
the
merit
merit only, not the premium.
It isn't the merit what's in our policy and what we would have to change and improve. I thought you didn't want to change that, so I'm trying to.
I don't want to change it, but if we want to add a premium, you have to okay a budget that allows me to add something above and beyond the merit. In the 90s, it was called a cost of living adjustment.
I mean, I understand, don't get me wrong, I understand one-time merit or salary increase adjustments. I mean, you know, at one point in time, I was maxed out my salary range, but I still got a 3%. My salary didn't go up, but I got 3% just paid out.
Now, we do have that. If you hit your ceiling, I don't know the percentage on top, it might be 1.5 or 2. If you hit your ceiling and you still get
So to
an
understand,
evaluation, you're just at the top, but you get a amount.
so to understand what you're doing in this merit increase, the semantics, I guess I'm not too worried about it. To see that the lower quartiles, when you go back to Cindy's email or whatever it was, is that right? Is that would demonstrate that?
Yeah, that's the part I don't have the details. I ran the total numbers, and this still moves people very quickly through. But I'm gonna get you what quartiles, what positions, like, because Kevin's comment was,
It's all on Kevin's mind.
yeah.
Okay. So I guess so I think before we make any personnel expenditure rate or merit decisions, you're thinking we should get that information and then finalize it. Is that the process?
You tell me.
I
I need to structure draft number 2.
Huh?
I didn't believe so,
You didn't believe what?
that we needed that information. Basically, we're saying the premium is gonna be across the board for all salary, correct?
Say that again.
The premium we're
Yes.
addressing is across the board on salary increases, regardless of position, quartile, et cetera. It's the merit that will fluctuate based on the
where you're at.
quartile and based on where you're at.
And the merit should
Overall,
adjust, and the merit should be the lower quartile.
We'll get
should
more
get
on the merit
more
than the upper
than the
quartiles,
others,
correct.
which is what you're asking, Rick.
I don't have a problem with that part of it.
Which is already structured that way.
Right, we called it a comp ratio. If you were in the lower part of your salary range and you had the same level of performance as somebody way up in their salary range, you got a higher percentage of increase. Then I think as I'm understanding all this, then my concern is that the flat, whatever the flat line number is it 4%?
6%.
My point is that if you're in those quartiles, and it doesn't have to be tied to merit, okay? But if you're in quartile 4, then you've got a higher base in your position, okay? Then you're gonna get more dollars than somebody on the low end of that quartile. And I think what we're trying to do is move people up into at least the second and third quartiles. And so my suggestion would be, somebody thinks that's not a good idea, that's fine, is that we find a way to handle it much like our merit increases. In other words, those people in the higher quartiles are gonna get a lower percentage. If the $204,000, I'm not too worried about, okay? It's just, again, I think last year what we talked about was this, and I think maybe some of us are still talking that. We need to move the people that are in the lower quartiles up faster.
So let me repeat what you're saying, because instead of a flat premium, like I said, it's equivalent to what back in the 90s they'd say cost of living. Do that the same ratio philosophies we already set up our metrics, and then see how that changes the quartiles.
Right.
I mean, I can give you.
My point is, let's just do the quick math. If I make $100,000, I'm getting 4%, I'm getting $4,000. Okay?
No,
If I make $40,000, I'm getting $1,600 and I'm not moving up as fast.
I understand what you're saying, and I can run that scenario, and I can also then show how they're moving to see if it meets what you're,
Okay.
see what that's.
The only thing I want to move the lower quartile people, I agree with that. The only problem I have with that though is, and I go back to the cost of living, okay? That's basically what we're looking at is the cost of living adjustment.
It's tied to the market.
You know, you make $100,000, I make $40,000. My loaf of bread costs the same as yours.
Well, I think that
So my cost of living goes up the same as yours. So if
Don't
I
disagree with that.
spend $100 at the grocery store, I'm not gonna, if the cost of living went up 4%, I'm not gonna spend $104. If you spend $100 at the grocery store, yours is going up. So that's where I think that 4% needs to stay the same, and we're doing something to the lower quartiles through the premium.
The only thing I would say about that, Kevin, I don't disagree when we were talking about cost of living, if that's the way you want to look at it. Originally, when we started last year, and maybe our focus has changed, was we were trying to affect turnover. We were trying to affect vacancies at our lower rates, okay? And so I think that that's the reason that I think we should consider something a little different than just a flat 4% across, because our turnover has not been in the upper two quartiles. Our turnover has been in the bottom two quartiles, or vacancies in the bottom quartile, or the bottom two quartiles, or the bottom ends of the pay scales at the very, and the grade levels, okay? And that's the lower end of the ranges, okay? In other words, we're having troubles, and I think we still have our biggest trouble at staffing level. I'm gonna just call it 8 to 12, 8 to 10, something like that. Grade levels,
I don't know.
I would say. I mean, that's your police officers, your frontline sewer workers, and so on and so forth in that range. And so that's where we need to be competitive. That's where we're trying to affect turnover. It seems like we were able to do that. I have no problem with everyone. I get the fact that everybody would love to have that increase. I just want to find a way, and I'm open to suggestions if we can, that we can agree on, to work with those folks on the lower quartile and move them up and try to affect that turnover. Because that's still where our turnover and our vacancy is, I believe. If I'm wrong, let me know, but that's sure my perception, at least.
Let me get you more data.
Okay.
Let me compare based on what you're saying and
I'm fine with it across the board, because I'm going on top of my head, but if I remember, we only had 50% of our employees in the upper quartile to begin with. So yeah, maybe they're gonna get more than what you would anticipate or going to agree to or want them to, but if you look at it comparatively, if we do the 4% across the board, that's still affecting less than 50% of our employees that are in the upper quartile. Yes, their percentage is gonna be much greater, but once again, we still are gonna be moving all those lower quartiles up faster. Because the people in the upper quartile, they've already maxed out. And that's why you said that they won't be considered necessarily a.
Well, I'm in the upper two
Okay.
quartiles, by the
Upper
way.
two?
Right, absolutely. The other half, that means like a median.
Yeah.
In a way, the ones in the upper half. And I don't remember the dot matrix last year
I'm
consistently,
going on top of
but
my head.
if everybody was just happy with 4% wants to move on, then let's just move on.
I can crunch some more numbers for you. I don't mind.
Three of us that spoke up, what about the other three?
So anybody else? Thoughts?
Why don't I get you more data? And in light of having another budget workshop for one topic, it might be discussion or, somehow I will get it to you and
I will say the dot matrix we did last year, the 4 quartiles and how many people we had in each one of them helped a lot to understand. So maybe we can see what we've done and what your proposals might do, and that might help us understand that.
well, that's what I was explaining to Kevin. I just don't have time to get that far. But
Sorry.
Nope, I can do that and we will. Should be determined on that.
Sorry, I'm gonna speak up now. Sorry, I had something I was chewing. The one
It's called
thing
a
that,
Whopper.
I know it's a Whopper. I was like, I can't chew it fast enough. You think it was dissolved. The one thing that, how do I put this? Want to be careful of if we don't do the premium and we only do it on the merits, because I understand we're trying to move the lower quartiles up, but we also don't want the people in the upper quartiles to feel like they are kind of like what Kevin said, they're being treated unfairly just because I make more, I'm gonna get less. We don't want to upset and possibly have some turnover up there from people being upset that they're not treated as equally as the people in the lower quartiles. Kind of just not fairness thought.
Well, on the other hand, they're being paid a very nice salary because they deserve it.
Yes.
I mean, compared to someone that recently been hired, obviously they're not gonna get paid as much as the one over
Right.
here. So I just think it's straight across the board that we're talking about.
Yeah, so I'm afraid if we
Yeah.
adjust it too much, there's gonna be the unfairness thought going through.
But that's fine as well, and it's no secret that I've been very aggressive with our HR, salary basis, et cetera. That was one of my hot button issues last year, because once you looked at the matrices and all the information we received from where we stood in 2020, 2019, et cetera, we were so far behind the curve in
Mhm.
similar municipalities that it was embarrassing that we said as part of
That's
our motto,
right.
we wrote up last year, that you want to hire the best, well, guess what? If you want to hire the best, you need to pay the best.
Yeah.
And it's not just paying them to bring them on, it's retention as well. And even something as aggressive as the 6.6 you got on here, even though that may seem like it's an aggressive increase, it's really not. If you look once again at the matrix from 2020, 2021, 2019, et cetera, it's basically still just bringing us up to barely matching where we should be. So, but that's all I gotta say.
Throw a big wrench into it. I feel like that when we're looking at this, if we can identify, which I have identified one area that I won't talk about here in a second, but if we identify those classifications that we are not happy with, then we give them something more. You do the 4% across the board, you do the merit itself. And then you go to classification XYZ that you feel that we're not where we, and you give them an extra 1%. You give everybody else what you're doing as a cost of living, and you adjust that. And an example of that is, I think the dispatchers are extremely unpaid, very low. I've got a lot of experience with those people. One of the reasons I believe we're struggling with that specific area is because dispatchers do not have to be physical in their ability to perform their duties. So over the years, there have been people that have moved into that service, whether it's in the metropolitan area, et cetera, that have a disability, I don't want to say disability, excuse me, that have a reason that they can't physically do the job of the police officer. They've had an injury, or the firefighter, or whatever the position is within the city. They can't do something. They're in transportation and they can no longer drive the truck because of something occurs. And the dispatching agencies have been an area that a lot of those people have been able to move into and maintain within the organization and perform a very, very important job. Well, in our organization, they can't afford it. I got to take a real heck of a step down. The salary is not up appropriate. I don't care what those our people tell us that, oh, this is the media, this is the media. They need to be with the level of salary that is compensable to the other people within the organization. They are just as important as the police and the ambulance and the transportation. They are. And when you look at our classifications here, and you look at the fact that our dispatcher supervisor, who's responsible for 10 people, is at level 9, and you look at level 10, where you have policing sergeants and you have public works foremen that are responsible for 3 and 4 and 8 and 6 and 12 people. Why isn't the supervisor of the dispatch up at a level 10 rather than down at a level 9? Why isn't your dispatchers, your lead dispatchers, up at a level of mid-management? In each of your 3 levels of your dispatching, they need to go up at least 1, if not 2. One on the dispatch supervisor, but the other one's at least 2. There's where we're having a big struggle. And we need to get those folks up to a salary range. And we need to get that area there to, if we have somebody within the organization that needs to step away from where they're at, that they can move into that. I think that's an area. And the same way with our other areas of our public works on our lower Tech 1s and Tech 2s. If that's what we're having a problem with, we need to just adjust those. That kind of goes a little bit with what Richard is saying, but just just pick out those ones, those particular ones. I think those are the places we need to look at, and that's the way I'd say we look at solving the problem. So there's my soap.
All right, let me get you some data.
Yeah, but that's a lot different than the premiums and the merit raises. That's basically going back to the whole structure of the classification of the grade levels. But then again, salaries commence with experience. If you're a tech one, that means basically you're fresh out of high school. How much experience do you actually have in that department? So obviously,
Well, and
you're
I
gonna
would-
be at a lower wage regardless.
I would caution to compare jobs to jobs too, you know, because you want to base it on the market, but you also have this nuance that supply and demand can be very volatile in some, and we're definitely on the opposite side. We want to be on supply and demand on dispatchers. So, you know, private industry, that means, okay, well, we can make little more money. So let me get some data for that. I will get you quartile, some deeper dive data, and we will postpone a direction until then. So are we ready to move on to transportation? Yeah, we are, okay. So page 60, center bottom, page 60 is where the transportation fund starts. Just a couple notes on the revenue side, which sales tax is the same across as it was with general fund. My beginning and ending is based on the reserves amount. Again, all the fund reserves per our reserve policy is met. The next page is really the details from the revenue. Sales tax, vehicle tax, fuel tax, county road tax, it's all based on history. You can see the Missouri fuel share did have a little bit of increase there. County road taxes leveled back out that we've gotten from the county. Special road districts and all the grants are tied specific to projects. And if you go to the full capital sheet again at the beginning of the budget, we'll identify those particular dollar amounts per project. And the rest, interest and sale of used equipment. There's no big, huge change except our grants for transportation definitely predicted to go up based on some projects. As far as the expenses, do you have any questions on the revenues?
Gina, the county road tax that we pay, okay, because there's a lot of stuff going on in that area of the arena right now. Is that, what is it? How?
That tax is based on lane miles in the city. It's based on roads, not, like sales tax, we collect 8% on when you go to the gas station and there's fuel tax, we get through the county and it's based on our infrastructure, not volume.
Not the assessed valuation of the city, it's based on the road miles in the city?
99% sure that's the cost basis. It's more on how many lanes.
So it's
It's the actual infrastructure that we have in our city that we maintain.
The county's just a pass-through.
And if the county's the pass-through.
Right, the money's going to the state through the fuel tax.
Right.
So that money comes from the state to the county?
Yeah, we get it from the county, which is, you notice, 1 year back in 2020, we didn't get a check, so they caught us up, and we got a little more this year, which, like you said, I know there's some questions on calculations and stuff. It's not anything we calculate, but we get it through the county based on our transportation infrastructure.
Okay, now, so the state sends it to the county for them to distribute to the county. Does the county get it based on the road miles that are in the county then, or is it, where does the money start with? Does it start
I'm
with
going
the gas
to
pump?
assume, yeah, starts at the gas pump, but it
Starts
doesn't
at the
matter
gas
if you
pump.
have one
Okay.
gas pump in your city or 15, unlike sales taxes tied to a volume of purchases.
Mileage
Yeah.
and gas.
Yeah, so there's probably some calculation MoDOT has that they help the counties out with that says you get this much, and by the way, you need to give this
Yeah.
much to this entity and this much to this entity, and the county itself gets to keep it based on their lane miles. And probably pavement versus gravel too.
Now you're getting way above.
It's
the
pretty
details.
scientific, but that's pretty scientific
Yeah.
stuff.
Okay, that's interesting. Learn something new every day. Thank you.
So based on expenses, page 62, the next page. Again, personnel will rearrange that. I do, and Kevin can answer the specific questions, but just to give you a summary real fast. Water, sewer, and transportation and all their personnel, there are some recommended changes on those. For transportation, couple change that affects both transportation, or all three, transportation, water, and sewer, is adding a municipal electrician. The GIS technician right now has two responsibilities, and because of their work, we want to separate out, and GIS tech has just GIS tech. So the locator position will be in sewer. So because of all the sharing, and we're adding, for transportation, we're adding one additional tech. So total for all water, sewer, and transportation, it is increasing 4 people. Sure I'm saying that right. It's increasing 4 full-time, but decreasing 1 part-time because there's a part-time movement to full-time. So we can get into details on the departments. And for transportation, that's basically adding a full-time public works, 1, 2, or 3, whichever one that. They're now sharing a municipal electrician as well as the GIS tech, which isn't new. So that's how transportation's personnel is changing. As far as O&M and projects, I'm going to leave that to Dave or Kevin, and then Dave and Kevin on capital.
Under the operations and maintenance of professional services, if I'm looking at that correctly, the definite increase from 6,000 to 26,000.
So Kevin, do you want to do the highlights of your O&M? or-
Sure.
On page 62.
Kevin, you want me to take that?
Let me catch up with you here. Sorry.
Where's the line of that?
It's about, it's, the upper.
Professional service
Six
amount,
one down and very high.
733,800.
So I'm sorry, the question was, under which line?
Why the increase in professional services from 6,000 to 26?
Is that 20 grand?
Yeah, that is the, we are budgeting to do a public works personnel and workflow assessment next year. Kevin, you want to go ahead and take it from here?
Yeah, so we've been obviously adding personnel. And as we add personnel, frequently get asked, because we need to budget and plan, as well as build facilities that are big enough for them. As we continue to add them, we continue to find more things that we need to maintain and are not being maintained. So the question is basically, how many people will it take to maintain the system? The answer is, I don't know. So what we're trying to do here is find an outside group that can do a workforce study based on our amount of infrastructure and apply basic, best practice standards to the amount of infrastructure we have and come up with a working plan, per industry standards. And we're talking about sewer for the most part here, but I think it's worth doing for all departments, including transportation and water. But we've, as most of you folks know, we created a very unusual monster here in the sewer system that we have, and it's unlike really any other. There's a few around that are similar, but what we're trying to ascertain is, in the grand scheme of things, ultimately, how much personnel is it reasonably going to take to maintain this stuff? And so we're reaching out to a couple outside groups that will look at our infrastructure, look at our vehicles, look at our workflow and our staffing levels, and apply those standards and come up with basically a plan so we can budget. And maybe we're better off than we think we are. Maybe we just need to make, efficiency changes, who knows? But that's what that's about. And I think it's a really great move, and I think it's something we should do, because, I can't just sit here every year and go, just keep adding more people until I say, well, I don't think that's a plan. I think it needs to be more thought out. And basically, that's that expenditure, and
So have you signed a contract for that amount with a company or anything?
that's an estimate. We have not. We're gonna go and do an RFP. That will be probably in January. We have an estimate, and we think that estimate is good based on some loose numbers that we've gotten. We think we're in that range of where we need to be, even with a national group. There's a national group we talked to, and we think we're in the sweet spot there with that amount of money. It was really, there's not a lot of folks that do this, right? And maybe we can come up with some other ones too. But we've just begun that process of having those conversations with these groups. But I think for everybody, and especially for you guys, I think it's a smart move to have a more strategic plan than just me coming and say, keep staffing me up. Well, I don't think that's too much of a plan.
It'd be very similar to what we did a few years ago with the police department.
With what, with the police?
When we did the study with them. And I echo Kevin's comments. I think it is very much needed. I've done a lot of research in concert with Kevin, and we have more grinder stations than almost anybody in Missouri, almost anybody in the Midwest. From my research, I only found 5 different towns in the United States, and obviously I didn't look at every one of them. But talking to vendors like municipal equipment that supply a lot of the equipment around the nation to companies, I only found 4 cities in the United States, 2 in Florida, 1 in Colorado, and 1 in Illinois, that even came close to the amount of grinder stations we have. And folks, remember something, we're pushing 1,400 grinder stations out there now. And I'm including lift stations, so that's every sewer station that we have. You're looking at 1,400. Now, the last time, we have tried to do preventative maintenance on those stations. The last 2 years, since I've been in charge of our administration over public works, we have tried to get to every one of them every year. We have never been able to do so. We reached about 60% in 2021. And this year, we didn't even come close to that because of all the other stuff that we have been dealing with, and all of the reactive stuff that we've had to deal with, especially over the last few months. So I echo what Kevin says, and I think it is something that is money well spent.
Okay, I just wanted the explanation. Thank you.
Sure.
Just to tag onto that real quick, Mike, when you're talking about other cities, years ago, I went to the Public Works Public Committee, okay? I don't know if it was John Battle or Rick on it, whatever, but they quoted Pigeon Forge in Sevierville, which is Dolly Parton land or Dolly Wood or whatever, as having even more grinder stations than we have. So it might be something you might look into.
I will. It's not one that like I said, I couldn't
No,
know.
they
I
didn't
didn't know them all.
It was 10 years
it out.
ago, but they said that we were only second to them in the United States for the number of grinder stations or force names or something to that effect.
I'll be down there in May.
Have to take a tour.
Check it out for us, Kevin.
I did visit Lincoln County. That's the one Mike referred to in southern Illinois. They have 800. And I did go there this summer and look at their operations, and it is definitely smaller, but it's the largest one that I could find without getting on a plane. They run things a little differently. I won't get into the weeds with that, but certainly a conversation we can have for another time. But yeah.
Excuse me, I have another question. You probably couldn't tell me tonight, but how costly would it be? I'm talking about the Parkway, west of the bridge, down through KK, at the different intersections of having the pedestrian sign with crosswalks, that I just feel like we really could use that on our Parkway, especially on the west end.
Are you talking about a mid-street crossing, not at an intersection?
On the intersections.
Oh, at an intersection? That's certainly, that's something we can get an estimate for sure. I did one of these in a town not too long ago. Last year, it had LEDs, which are required in the overhangs and be surprised. I think that was about $35,000 each for the LEDs, the push button LEDs and ADA compliance, and you have to put in the truncated domes and the ramps and all that. But depending on the sites, it's site specific, depending on each intersection and what's there currently and what needs to happen for ADA. So, I mean, we could certainly look into that.
Well, since we have sidewalks now,
Yeah.
and there are businesses that people do walk to or whatever, and these major intersections, KK and Nichols and Case, and eventually Jeffries will certainly be one. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring it up to see what we're looking at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Kevin, any highlights in O&M that you want to go through, or, oh, I'm sorry. Alderman.
Yeah, I welcome any questions.
I've got lots of questions.
You want to take a break first? No.
Going over, next page, Mayor, jump ahead, we'll go down. Sidewalk improvements, Osage Beach Parkway, under capital expenditures, we have budgeted 0. So I thought we had some type of sidewalk master plan that we were trying to stay with as far as areas where we're targeting for sidewalks. We budgeted nothing for next year.
We don't have any matching funds.
Alderman Osteen, we do have one sidewalk we're doing next year, and that'll be from Columbia Avenue on 42 to the school. That sidewalk was
Is that a carryover? Because I remember having discussions this year.
well, we went out for the grant this year, so we asked for you guys to provide us with your approval so I could include it in the grant. That project is actually, I'm going out to bid for the engineering service for that project right now. And that project is due to kick off next summer. So that's kind of where that project is. That's the only sidewalk project that we have on the books for 2023. And for what it's worth, sir, the sidewalk master plan, which I know that Gina wants to get back to that, is technically not blessed by the board. And so I think eventually we want to bring that back to the board. I don't want to speak for Gina here, but I think eventually we want to bring that back to the board and tweak that a little bit and get the board's blessing on it.
That project was up on that list pretty close. We didn't jump a bunch and it's all about money, but that project is listed and it was coming up and it was included in the draft sidewalk plan.
So I think that from an accounting standpoint, if we were sitting here next year and this project happened on 42, I know we haven't approved it yet, but it's in the capital side, there'd be another line item here that said Osage or sidewalks 42. Because this is just sidewalks, Osage Beach Parkway.
Yeah, I put miscellaneous,
So where's the money for that? Maybe that's a question.
where's the Highway 42 sidewalk improvements? That's engineering and construction. That's under miscellaneous streets and roads, because 42 is not the parkway, and I didn't want to put it under parkways.
So it's in here, where's miscellaneous streets and roads, I'm sorry, just to follow.
773155.
Yeah, so if you look at your detail, go a couple page further, then it'll list out all the projects
Oh, I
that
see
are
it.
part of those lines.
It's up there, okay, so
Sorry.
it's there, it's just a geography thing. So we'll have to better come down to $757,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just curious, so once again, that should have had its own line item on the capital expenditure side, correct?
I'm sorry, should it have
That
its own?
that should have had its own line item, since it's a targeted project for sidewalks?
Well, Carrie and I have been trying really hard we grow our charter account so fast, but yet at the same time, get the intent of your tracking for history. So that's why when we created Osage Beach Sidewalks, it's like, any sidewalk project, Osage Beach Sidewalk. Well, then when he threw me Highway 42, I'm like, well, it's a sidewalk improvement, but it's not on the parkway. So we can talk about, other sidewalk projects. We can outline it however it's easiest on the budget, but at that point, it's more of an accounting and how do we manage our charter accounts.
Any other questions in transportation?
Well, I'm just trying to link things in. What I believe they should be categorized as, they aren't. They're in other items, so therefore I'm trying to piece it all together. My other question was going back to asphalt overlay. Once again, as targeted projects, that's just basically asphalt overlay. Asphalt overlay is just a lump sum for all these designated roads you're going to address in 2023. Because I'm trying to piece together what's included under what
Yeah.
line item.
And I do, well, I'm sure you saw that on page 64, we normally don't list out O&M projects in the capital, but because that is such a pot and it can fluctuate from year to year, that's based on that pavement maintenance plan that was blessed by the board. And asphalt, seal, and striping are considered operation and maintenance, not capital expansion. So therefore, it is an O&M. So that's why I kind of give that extra, here's the roads affected category, and they bid them all together. It's all one big project.
So in that same vein, how is it possible that for this year, we're gonna end year-end at $109 in asphalt overlay?
Do what about?
$109.
Well, there was one bidding and they didn't
That's it
accept
this
it.
year?
It basically was that bidding, we always have to bid the project, and if you remember, we didn't proceed because the bids were so high, but we still had that advertising piece, so.
What work is that?
Sorry.
So that's the PP&P plan, if that,
Pavement maintenance.
they've been
So
preventing.
slurry seal and some other smaller projects, is that what that is?
Yeah, if you remember, we had bidded that out earlier in the year, and I talked about it in my comments at one meeting, so I know it might have gotten lost, but it had, I can't remember, the bids came in at like 1.8 million, and it was like, we're not gonna do this. So what I directed Cochran to do was just basically move everything back a year. So everything that we would have done this year is budgeted for next year. They've given us fresh estimates, and they did go up a little bit, not to 1.8 million, but they did go up a little bit. And so that is essentially a redo of what we did this year. But this time, as we continue to get smarter and smarter with our bidding, my conversations with Dave Christensen, with Cochran, and Dave Van Leer is that in the January, February timeframe, actually January, we're gonna bid this out in January. Last year, we had kind of prioritized some other projects and didn't bid that out until the summer, and that turned out to be a bad idea, because that's why we got those bids so high, or at least one of the reasons why. And so the goal in 2023 will be to bid it out way early in the year, secure that contractor, and then get them started in the spring.
So basically, we're budgeting $1,080,000 this year, which is partly $815,000 we budgeted for 2022 that we never used. Correct. So it's basically just washing out. But I was just curious on how we only spent $109
Yeah, that's a little bit.
this year on asphalt.
That's for the bluff
Seems a little odd.
area.
It's a bag on those.
That's all I have.
I have one question. On the first page, the road repair and maintenance and sign parts and maintenance, each one of about 30,000, is there projects with that?
Yeah, since 2014, the federal government has basically mandated a reflectivity. That basically means how much light comes off the sign.
Mm-hmm.
We're about, I think we're about 3/4 done with that. We have to keep marching on that. We take a bite out of that every year. That's where that's coming from. I think we're 3/4 done with that. We've been doing that every year for a number of years, and we're gonna keep working on
Thinking it's
that.
gonna cost more to do this last part,
We're trying to
finish it with it,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, Alderman Schuman, there's also a couple of minor culvert replacements in there as well. So the biggest part of that is what Kevin said, but there's a few other things that are included in there, road repair and maintenance items that are also included.
Yep, we've replaced a number of culverts this year on Osage Beach Road. We're gonna continue doing that. I think it's 30 culverts we have scheduled for 2023. We just finally marched down the road during areas, and the galvanized metal culverts don't do well with salt and they dissolve, and so we're continuing to improve those as well. Anything else in transportation we could take
I've got
a
a
bite
question
on?
real quick. So, first of all, what is communication fiber rehab, just for knowledge and knowledge?
Engaged by rear, is that the,
$5,000 for something?
the upgrade for the door locks communication?
There is fiber that connects the Public Works office to the Public Works transportation shed. And that fiber.
Across the street, is that what we're talking about?
Yes, sir. And that fiber allows us to control the door locks, the key card door locks on the transportation shed. it is intermittent, and our vendor has told us that it is damaged and needs repair. That's what that is.
The Vector truck, we have a bunch of information on it, but if I'm reading this right, that Vector truck's about $475,000.
Correct.
Okay. And so how long would you think that the Vector truck would, its normal lifespan?
20 years.
So it's about $25,000 a year it costs us to have. What do you think that would save? Is there any savings in O&M throughout water, sewer, transportation to reflect that investment?
It's not necessarily, I mean, so if we can jump into the Vector. Vector is not kind of an ROI type of a deal. The Vector is a tool that when I got here and discovered we didn't have one, I found it puzzling, maybe troubling. So I'll start from the start. From the handout, if you guys remember. So what we did do in 2019, a jetter truck was purchased, right? A jetter, and I believe at that time, is that right, Mike, that we had it was proposed to buy a Vector.
There was discussion.
There was a discussion. We ended up with a jetter truck, and that's good because we have to clean sewers, right? We have to clear blockages. However, what the Vector does is a number of different things for a number of different divisions. So, and we don't have a tool at current time that can do any of those, and we'll go into that a little bit right now. So, the Vector is basically a vacuum, a pumper truck, and a jetter truck. Another word for it is, again, a combination truck. It does jobs that the jetter truck and pumper truck do, but it does other jobs more effectively. So also in your handout, we have 88 major lift stations, right? Those lift stations, the most problematic thing we have with them are mats. And so the mats are basically things you're not supposed to flush, right? Rags, fibrous, not flushable wipes that are not flushable, dental floss, you name it. So that, kind of gonna get weird here, but that congeals with the grease that's dumped down in the drain, and it creates a mat on all major lift stations. And grinders too, but to a lesser degree. So those stations are deeper than grinder stations. They can be 25, 30 feet deep. We cannot remove that from the pumper truck. We have no ability to do that. So the only thing I can do is rent a Vector. Those are, again, about $1,700 for a 6-hour day. They come in from Jeff City, lots of windshield time, I pay for that. And I cleaned out one station, and that was Sands, and did an amazing job. But again, I have no tool in my inventory to do any of that. I can't remove rocks, can't remove debris, there's nothing I can do. So the pumper truck is basically designed, and we've seen them, they're all over the place. They clean out grinder stations, right? They clean out septic tanks. They have a really low vacuum head. They cannot remove, and they're designed to move sewage, liquid. They can't remove rocks, debris, anything else. So that stuff was just never done. And I can take it up 60 lift stations that should have been cleaned annually, but haven't been cleaned in over a decade. The mat on them is so thick you could literally stand on the top of the lift station. You're not going to fall through. It's that thick. That creates a number of different problems. What it does is it locks the floats in. The floats are the controls which toggle on the pumps. They get locked into that grease mat. Odor, not a good thing, as you can imagine. It's so where I'm going with this is, so with just the 88 stations that we have, just the major stations, they need to be cleaned at least once a year. They haven't been done in some of them again in decades. I've cleaned one this year, and that cost me almost $2,000. So going back to my first statement, how this thing wasn't here when this sewer system kicked off, I'll never know. Maybe it was just, they were rookies at this and they didn't know what they were doing. But it's a necessity. It's kind of like an Air Force asking for a plane. It's like, well, what are you going to do with a plane? Well, we're the Air Force. So into the additional capabilities of this, which are absolutely necessary as well, is hydro excavation. Hydro excavation is just like it sounds. It's vacuuming out the soil. So with, along with the 1300 PSI wand, if you will. It's like a garden hose on steroids. And so you're backing and sucking at the same time. What this does is creates a very small surgical pothole, minimally invasive, and it's not a backhoe. And backhoes are good at breaking things and making a lot of surface damage, which requires an immense amount of restoration, right? Whether it be sod or asphalt or curbs or whatever. Asphalt excavators are fine if you're out in the field somewhere. If you're doing that, you know, on Ozark Meadows or in Mace or wherever, you make the repair, then you got to repair the repair. So on one of the pages, if you can kind of remember this or thumb through it, you're looking at a hydro excavation. It's about a 3-foot diameter hole, and it goes right down onto the repair. I'm not going to show this because it's pretty neat. This is the hole that they're hydro excavating, and this is the problem right here. What you see is a web of other franchise utilities that are conflicting with the repair. And if you look real close, you see what we're trying to get at. It's under all these conduits. You got 3-phase, 480 amperage power here. You got telecommunications, orange cable here, which is fiber. You got a water main here, and then you got a bunch of other conduits here, street lights, you name it. It's all in one hole, and this is very, very common. How do you dig that with an excavator that's got big old nasty teeth on it? You can. You're going to end up spending thousands of dollars in repairing your repair because you're going to break other utilities.
Or you're gonna take 5 hours to dig it.
That's
and
the other
a hydro
thing. Or
excavator will take 15 minutes to dig.
you dig with a teaspoon and you're there for 2 days. Those are your options. And so, again, the only machine that is capable of doing this is a combination truck. The following page is a very similar narrative. This is a hydro repair that was done with a demoed Vector unit combination truck this year. It was hydrant in a small traffic island. We would have had we not had this demo unit, and we pulled this trick a number of times. Like, we want to demo your truck. And we do a bunch of jobs. And then we ask another company, come on, demo that truck. We're really looking at that hard. And we do a bunch of jobs. So we kind of got hooked in to paint the fence a couple of times this year. So here again, we would have had to remove this circular concrete island, the barrier curb, and then the apron around it. Had to cut. We would have to restore curb, asphalt, and concrete apron. That didn't happen. And furthermore, as Mike alluded to, this was a 30-minute job. We removed that soil 4 feet down, as much hole as we need. And that's the thing, you can control how big or small the hole is. So moving on into other capabilities of this, one of the major problems we have in Osage Beach is lots and lots and miles of plastic pipe with no trace water. Locating here is a little bit of witchcraft. You have to guess your way through it. We're required by law to locate sewer, water, all our infrastructure by law we have to locate. We can often find ourselves 5 to 7 feet off within law. We're supposed to be in 3 feet on center, paint those lines, and that's supposed to be law. When the reality is we don't know where they are. Our GIS back in the day wasn't that accurate. It wasn't updated enough. We didn't have good as-built. We don't. And again, it's just a basic lack of tracer wire. So where this truck comes in, if it's a critical thing, we need to know where that pipe is. In comes a combination truck. We start potholing. It's not here, it's right here. Oh, there it is. Okay, we found it. That is a super, super valuable tool to have. Again, it is a pumper truck. It can do that in spades. It's much more powerful. We can drag hoses down a hill, and we can get at grinder stations that we could never dream of doing. And in fact, a number of grinder stations we cannot pump with our existing pumping trucks. We currently have 2. They're both probably 25% of the vacuum power of a combination truck. Again, storm, I can keep going all day on this, but I'll just finish up with what it can do for the transportation.
He's excited.
Well, we're on.
I just had one question. Was there any savings? That was my question.
Yes and no. Yes and no.
Hang on.
It's nuanced, but
you could have saved 10 minutes off that whole presentation by
Yeah.
just stating this. Those lift stations, that there are 88 major lifts or stations that we have, are recommended that they are serviced once per year to clean out the matting, correct?
Right.
You contract that out at $17 to do one lift station, correct? So therefore, to do all 88 in 1 year is $149,600. Basically,
that?
over 3 years, it's $448,800. So basically, the cost of doing this truck, or purchasing this truck, basically will have paid itself while we save on contracting out that service in less than 3 years.
That is correct.
It'll also save us over 25 years, not exactly, because there's labor, maintenance, et
Because there's
cetera.
labor.
Yeah.
that's
Basically,
on that
over
truck.
25 years, which you said is the life expectancy of that truck, that's basically $3,740,000 in savings.
Go with that.
You could have basically wrapped up
I'll
the
go
whole
with
10-minute
that.
conversation with, that would have been the stats.
So-
And all we would have said,
So much-
savings are right there.
But
That's the math that matters.
I'll run
So-
with that. So, again, just to wrap up, the storm system that we have, was never really inventoried within our GIS system. As you know, our GIS tech is a rock star, and so he's just begun literally a week ago, starting to inventory our system of storm culverts, conveyances, catch basins, and so forth. So as those are inventoried, guess what? We get to maintain that, and we cannot currently maintain any of those systems with a pumper truck either. So that was my final point. As this infrastructure comes online and needs to be maintained, because frankly, it never was, we've got culverts that are lost to history that we have to actually excavate and they're buried, they're gone. There was a culvert there and now it's a ditch. So again, this truck is fundamental in getting that whole program up to speed. So,
Already sold it for you.
all right. There you go.
Savings, math, dollars.
Another subject, okay. The Osage Beach Outlet Mall signal upgrade.
Right.
Mike and I talked about this, you and I talked about it, we talked about its lack of functionality at time, of frequency. I'm okay at this point with leaving it in the budget, but I think we need to be very cautious. We don't,
When we do it.
well, first of all, I mean, we never did, from what I understand, we never did replace the detector. We don't really know what's wrong. Is that a fair statement?
That's fair. I
Okay.
haven't put a lot of money into diagnosing.
Right. We don't know what's wrong, okay? We know that, I mean, sorry, guys, my daughter's a traffic engineer and I had a conversation with her, but there are components of this light, she's familiar with it, that could be the controller by chance or so forth, $3,000 to $10,000. And it is at, and I sent you that information, Mike.
Yes, sir.
We went to the MoDOT database and it was put in 94, best we can tell. It's at its end of its life. The problem is, who knows what, in the next 2 or 3 years, whether or not that intersection is going to change. And so I would ask that we leave this in here and try to determine what is the root of the issue here. What can buy us 2 or 3 years? And if it's $50,000, well, no, let's not repair it, okay? But if for $5,000 or $10,000, we have a reasonable idea that we can buy ourselves a couple of years and improve its functionality, then I would rather go that way than spend 60 grand on it and rip it out in 3 years because it doesn't fit with somebody's development.
Makes sense.
So,
I don't disagree with that, and I agree with you also that this needs to be a discussion because traffic cabinets, thankfully, we only have 6 of them, require, reinvestment just like any other infrastructure. And it's, this one in particular, as you mentioned, is our oldest one. It's an older controller. It's the only one that's called an Eagle. It's the only one I have. The rest of them are another brand and they're more modern.
actually, KK's just as old from what we can tell.
Could be.
It's 94 also.
Well, this one, the data I have is 1987.
On what?
Yeah.
On which?
87. The outlet mall.
It was, MoDOT database was 94, but anyway, close enough. It's 7 years.
Yeah, we got our money out of it, but, like any other infrastructure, it deserves upgrades. So this money would replace the loops that are troublesome with a single use. Well, I call it a camera, but there's another fancy name for it. It needs to be an image recognition thing, but rather than having a loop here, which need to be located, again, I don't even have a locator for that. That's another tool. So I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about those loops getting cut, failing. It's just a single use camera. So this is for the entire upgrade, right? And I don't disagree with you that the whole outlet mall thing is at play to some degree. If we were to replace the whole thing, and for some reason that intersection was to change and move, that would be, then the developer would have to incur those costs, obviously. I put it out there as a discussion starter. I think just, again, like anything else, it requires reinvestment, so.
So I think we can agree with what Richard said, and we can say, we're gonna do our best to see if we can figure out what's wrong with it. And like you said, Richard, if it's a $5,000 fix, it's a $7,000 fix, and we can buy 2 or 3 more years until we figure out what's going on with the mall, we'll do that. If we figure out that it's just totally done, we'll bring that information back to the board when we move forward with this project.
It does work. I mean, at the end of the day, it just has a propensity to let people out of the outlet mall that nobody's sitting there wanting out, okay? And it just doesn't move traffic very well. I'm sorry, I live on Zebra and I go to Walmart and I go over to some buddies on Proctor Road and so forth, and I go through that light a lot. And it drives me crazy watching the traffic stack up, and at times, there's nobody wanting to be out of the outlet mall. Today, 15 cars stacked up whenever somebody pulled up to take a right turn and go up towards Minor Mike's, and it trips, okay? And I watched, and it made a right turn, and 15 cars on each side, because I was one of them, stacked up and waited for the light to change when nobody was sitting at the outlet mall. And so it has some functionality. I don't know if we can improve that functionality or not, but we should try to and see what we can do. And so all I would ask again is that we don't endeavor into completely redoing all of the mechanics of it until we figure out what's wrong and what that costs, okay? But along that line, the electrician, okay? So I support the in-house electrician approach, okay? But I want to make sure that I understand it, and if you want to give an overview, that's fine, but I want to make sure he would end up being a traffic signal expert compared to what we have now in-house, is that right?
Yeah, for sure. So, as you have proposed before, training up staff to a level that they're comfortable with working on traffic controls. It's kind of an unfair thing to ask a heavy equipment operator to read electrical diagrams. However, to also to your point, I think it's a really easy thing for an electrician to open up, and there's volumes of diagrams within each cabinet. That makes sense. So he can read electrical diagrams, so okay, power supplies here and comes through here, and so that makes sense to me. And I think that's a great starting point. And I think, it'd be a tough thing to find an electrician who happens to traffic control this, but it's not a far jump at all, is it? And that's where that's what I'm seeing going forward, where I would reinvest or invest money into traffic control cabinet training with a qualified AC electrician. That totally is in his wheelhouse. But that's just one of those things. So we'll kind of get into the overview of it. So this proposed municipal electrician would be housed under the sewer department, right? That's the obvious choice, given the amount of infrastructure.
Hold on.
Sorry?
We have it split between transportation, water, sewer.
The funding. Yeah, but he lives in the sewer department. He reports to the sewer department. His funding, his funding is through Public Works as a whole, but he's in the sewer department, reporting to the sewer department supervisors. Again, due to the stations that we've already talked about. So going from there, let's say sky opened up and it was a rare day on a leap year, and we didn't have any electric issues with the sewer department. So he could be doing preventative maintenance. He could be replacing electrical panels. He can work with the sewer department if there's any electrical work there. He can, if Ron has an issue here with IBAC, you can get him. If Ty has an issue at the airport, et cetera, et cetera. So he's a municipal electrician. Yes, he's in the sewer department, but he's available, going through the sewer department supervisors, basically when it's time to get to anything else. I'm not saying it's a dollar for dollar savings. Like I included a bunch of electrical information on the back of the packet. Those are just examples. I will say a lot of it, he could do a lot of it. So if you need more information on that, but that's.
This feels like the sewer thing in the back of the truck. Yeah, it's going to cost us more money. There's not going to be returns because we're not doing work we ought to be doing.
That's exactly right.
Right, we should be maintaining traffic signals, but we're not. Okay, we don't have a cost. The cost, he's gonna be able to improve functionality, but not necessarily save cost.
No,
That's what I'm trying to say.
I don't agree with that. I spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, the electrical costs haven't disappeared. They'll just
Okay, so are they in the budget? Are those savings in the budget?
Are the savings in the budget? I'm not
Did you
sure.
reduce any electrical costs that you think will be changed?
I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars is a lot of money.
Have I accounted for the savings?
Yes,
Well, no, because it's proposed. I don't know
Okay.
if this will happen. I can't.
and we ought to see some
I
numbers
can't do
going
that this
down.
year.
Then we ought to see some numbers going down.
Check
Love
back
to be
couple
con-
years.
I'd love to be
Okay.
that confident. I'd love to be that confident. But
That's always the concern.
just with lift station rehabs, for instance, Mr. Ross, the Meyer Electric portion of the lift station rehab was, I think, $120,000 to do 3 lift stations. He could have done all that.
All of it?
All of it. It's just 3-phase electrical power. He's taking in new panels, he's taking out the old ones, he's hooking up 3-phase power, he's going through all the lines and testing circuits. All of that. That's easy stuff. And yeah, you're right. There's a lot of stuff we're not doing. There's a bunch of hundreds of grinder panels that are out there that are way past the life expectancy that we haven't even approached that yet. So,
I just like to see our traffic lights be as effective as possible so that people move through our city, because I think that goes to customer service. And just to tie all that in. So the next idea is, and if anybody has any questions about the electrician before I move on, does anybody have any questions about it? Okay. So Proctor drainage improvements, is that, Proctor Road was rebuilt with storm, is this not the part that is still ditches, that is, for lack of a better term, south of the, trying to figure out where in the world we're doing this, what is this?
yeah, so you're right. Proctor was done. This is a storm conveyance between 2 properties that runs along the property line. The catch basin was all redone, and the riprap was installed several years ago. That riprap only went about 25, 30 feet maybe. Well, there's another probably 80 feet that was not
It's
totally
all
done.
washed out.
It's totally cut out, washed out up to 4 feet, trees are falling down. And on top of that, this particular neighbor who was along his property wants to put in a seawall. He pointed all this ditch out to me and the erosion cuts that were there. And he said, well, why don't we get our act together? I want this seawall. He's paying for that portion, obviously. Would you please improve this ditch where the
Take it through a
it's
seawall.
being cut? And so these 2 projects need to marry together so we can put our storm pipe through the seawall, so there's a level of coordination that needs to happen there.
Okay. All right. Next thing is Beach Drive culvert replacement. I assume that's more than one culvert.
Oh, yeah, there's the culverts. That's 30 culverts.
30 culverts.
No, we're talking about specifically the Beach Drive
Oh,
culvert
Beach Drive.
replacement project.
Like
That's a separate
$95,000,
culvert.
or surely that's more than one culvert. Tell me that it is.
That's one large culvert.
Well, I guess it is.
So that
Really?
there's a large drainage that goes under Beach Drive down near the lake. And that would be
Is it past Backwater Jacks as you're heading down Beach Road?
Yes.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, and
We'll have a party inside that.
is Hatchery Road stormwater improvements, is that what we would call curb and gutter and storm sewer?
No, Hatchery Road drainage improvements is if you're going through the gate at the city park, you first come to this ditch that runs along the park or along 54 and then comes down through our park, connects all those ditches. That area right there where that ditch goes under the road, anytime it rains, it washes everything into that parking lot below there. And before we can, this is a project that'll happen in concert with the PP&P plan, because Hatchery Road is on the PP&P plan. That project has to happen before we can do the PP&P plan. So those are 2 projects that'll be done in concert early in the year to improve that, not only that waterway, but improve the roadway, so that when we overlay everything, it all kind of meets together.
Okay, that's all I have, thanks.
Ledges Drive, what's going on with that? I thought that was a dead,
I'll take that one.
what one? Ledges Drive?
So
You just need to throw that away.
Ledges
bad.
Drive is probably,
It's never going away.
it's probably dead, sir.
It's bad news, Dad.
I'll be honest with you,
$350,000 debt?
this is,
That's not our expense.
yeah, this is a special road district project that has been on the books, as Tina alluded to, for 5 years.
Yeah, you know, I can
maybe
count about.
more than that.
Earlier this year, right before the budget, right before I was getting ready to turn the budget in, I now attend all of this special road district meetings as the city representative. The Ledges condos and Stone Ledges condos came and they said, we finally fixed the easement issue. And I'm like, okay, so if you fixed it, then, you know, this has been a project that has been on hold for many years. You know, we'll throw it back in the budget. I had Dave refresh the budget estimate. Under the wire, even though Gina was giving me the evil eye, I got it in there. And then I went to the next special road district meeting, and the individual who was having the hold up, his attorney showed up, and he basically poo-pooed the whole thing and said, no, you're wrong, we're not giving up the land. And so it's in there, but to be honest with you,
Is it still the issue where the one guy owns half of Ledges Drive and he, in order to give that up, he wants Fort Lane done?
Yeah,
That's
yes,
still the deal?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Trying to
either
hold
the
it
special
up.
road district or the city have the money to do both roads.
Okay.
We can only do one. And it's in there, but I don't think it's ever gonna happen. I will be attending the special road district meeting here in a couple of weeks, and I might get some more information there. The special road district has essentially given them 2 more months to straighten everything out, and then they've said they're just gonna be done with it. But I tried, I saw the rainbow at the end of and I was like, okay, maybe we can finally get this done, and I tried to get it in there, but I don't know if it's gonna happen. I would give it maybe a 15% chance.
So there's a chance, you say.
Yeah, but the revenue side of that is.
Also gonna go away.
It's also gonna go away, so.
Yeah, so it's really,
It's, yeah.
some other project roads are not doing necessary work.
I've got a question. What are we looking at for this welcome sign, 40,000? This is
Well,
something new, isn't it?
That is a placeholder because I know that's a pet project of the mayor's. You have something that welcomes on the west side coming in. This is preliminary placeholder for land and construction. So if it's a desire to move forward, we'll look for a location and then look for design, and more will come at the board level.
It's like the one that they just put in.
Some, but yeah,
Just like a bus, not like Hollywood sign, but-
54,
if you're coming
before
from,
you get to the
Yes.
Osage Beach city
Right.
limits.
because when you come
Even though
in,
it does say Osage Beach, the next 6 exits or whatever, you want a welcome sign there.
Welcome to Osage Beach, the heart of Lake of the Ozarks.
because when you come from the east to the west, we've got the Lake Ozark sign, and then you come
Right,
up and you
right.
go Osage Beach, Lake Ozark, but coming the other way, there's nothing. And if you remember years ago, we kind of moved forward with something, but then that was the economy, you know, a lot of the recession, everything happened, and we just never brought it up. So it's a placeholder to be
So would
determined.
this be a lit sign?
Well, we don't know. That's, we
This is a
will,
TBD though, so just in case we move forward with it.
Yeah.
This is throwing some money at an item so we get started and find out that
Exactly.
we can do it for less, or find out that we gotta have more, but we
Right.
gotta start somewhere.
And there's also money in there for land acquisition to place.
Okay,
That we're
very
trying to get going.
preliminary, but that's the first step.
just want to clarify.
Anything else in transportation?
If not, we'll move on to water, which starts on page, well, the summary starts on page 66. But if you turn to 67, I'll highlight.
Should we do a quick recess before we dive?
Oh,
Be a good break.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
10-minute break, how about start at 6:30, work?
All right. No problem.
only have one.
All right, here we go, folks.
All right, back to water. We're starting water. Page 66 is the summary, but 67 starts the revenues. I just want to make a few notes on the revenue. Water collection, I think I had went over that when we were talking about fees and other services with the city. That does include 10% increase from projected year into, or from 2022 projected year into the 23 budget. That is two things. One, growth. We've been, anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4% growth, just in volume or users, a combination of that. But also, I do plan, like I have stated before, by the end of this year to do a cursory increase, inflationary increase. I don't know what that is going to fall into, but based on trends and expenses, I assume water and sewer, it's going to be something like that. So I did include that. We will do more details with sewer, same story with sewer when we have more of the Tantera and stuff. And I think I had kind of stated that earlier. So in the intent that I want to increase rates, or at least evaluate or confirm that we need to increase rates, that is built into that. One note, another reason I forgot to add last time when I had stated that with water and sewer rates, we also need to assess the debt ratio. I got a call from DNR and it's getting pretty close to the 1 point, whatever they require us to have. And I had explained to them, I said, well, we haven't had a rate review in a little bit. We haven't increased since 2018 because we do have some debts being paid off. So anyway, another reason that I do want to do one sooner or later with everything we know now, but then plan on how does the Tantera and that expansion, which I know Mike probably has that when we get to sewer about the sewer plan. So that line item includes in the assumption that we will get a rate, some kind of rate review will be needed, or rate increase will be needed. If you notice on transfer to other funds, the CIT did increase significant, well, it kind of increased back up where it kind of been on the years past. Water and sewer are both the same. That's two parts. CIT first and foremost is to subsidize the difference between the debt payments and what we get on DNR SRF subsidy. So that can, out of that 1.9 million that I'm projecting to bring over to water fund, just a little over $1 million of that is the difference between our debt service that we're planning to pay out and that little bit of subsidy we get. We are, as of next year, we will be cashing out the second of our last debt and bond for water. So we'll have one more little bit bond, but we're getting close to getting all the water and sewer bonds paid out. So those are really the only two highlights.
Gina, in reference to revenue, is there any programs that are available out there or that we can be involved with in conservation of water and where our public utilizes changing out certain water things and we can assist them on getting reimbursement? Is there any kind of programs that are available out there and along with that, do we know what our consumption is? Are we above normal or below normal? And will we qualify for that? That's a big, broad statement.
And I got first part of that. Yes, I'm sure there are. It's been many years since we participated in anything like that, whether it's through, recycling and white goods to promote replacement, or when we do rate reviews, we always try to add some kind of promotion to the community. Hey, did you know if you do this, you could save 10% on your water usage? Some kind of campaign ads. And I know there are some assistance, whether it's resource assistance or program assistance, but it's been a long time since we've really done that. The second part of that, part of my rate review will be analyzing what classification of users, what's the average users per family. And I remember, and this has been a few years ago, that I had one time determined that our average single family 2.5 person house was an average of 5,300 gallons of water a month. That was an average. And then of course we have if it was apartment, it was 10 to then less. And if it was a bigger, so at one time I had all that data, but over the last few years, I've not had time to catch it up, but that will be part of that rate, because it is good to know what your average, because that's where you find the rates, at what point does your volumetric change? And so that's kind of your break even. What's your break even point on a water bill? But you gotta know what your profile, what your average user in different classifications use. If there's no more questions on revenue, next page on, same thing with sewer, real quick, just on personnel. We already talked about municipal electricians added to that GIS now as its own position. Other than that, water cut, those are really the only major changes to water. And I will let Kevin and Mike give overviews of the O&M and projects.
So one of the larger portions for O&M would be the well improvement and maintenance. The water department has identified several issues with almost every well house, and those projects are doors, roofs, flashing, gutters that are cut into three. So this is the first of 3 years of improvements that need to be done.
Kevin, what line item are you just?
Sorry,
talking about?
the well maintenance and repair.
774269 under operating capital.
Oh, so we jumped to capital, sorry.
Before we jump to capital, can
And
we
you-
go on?
yeah.
I thought we were all in first.
Yeah, I did too, so I can find where to go.
Jumping ahead.
So elephant in the room, tell me about $1 million for repair of the system. It's not capitalized.
I had that circled too.
Wow.
Is that Cantera?
Repair system
Kevin,
is the repair and maintenance that directly goes to our infrastructure. So
That's your grant money for the meters and PRVs.
Yeah, so this is dependent on the ARPA grant, which we're waiting to get any day now. What we have in here is a full replacement of all the meters within our system, and also all the PRVs, the pressure reducing valves that accompany that. In the entire system, we talked earlier, I think it was last year, about the failure rate of our water meters due to their age. They're just of that age where they're failing. And so Mike has submitted an ARPA grant for a full replacement of that. And these monies hinged on that being approved. And
So it's not obvious if it's there. Is there revenue, corresponding
So
revenue?
where's the revenue at?
well, I'm looking to see where.
Unless it's a 80-20, we pay 80. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is.
It's 7921.
Who's 79?
The state, we're
Our
20, we're
okay.
21. The local match is 21%.
So it should be,
I have a feeling the grant revenue line is only capturing the capital side and not the O&M. But
it
I,
should be about 700 some odd
which
dollars.
only
You're right.
further helps the CIT part that's contributed to the capital piece, so.
But the water meters in there, I want to say, was it around 650,000?
Yeah, I had in my notes that the city share of that would be 141,000.
Of just
So 675,000 of that 990, that 990 is grant funded.
In the backup from you and Kevin, 680 is the total O&M addition, and 533,000 is /350 is grant revenue. Whatever that means.
So that, it's okay if it's not there, but that grant revenue is not in here.
Correct, it is not.
So we're gonna
your
leave that in
CIT will go back down. Your
Okay.
CIT.
Oh, the transfers, the CIT
The
transfer,
transfer.
okay. Okay, that's how that'd be affected. Okay, that's all I have on.
good catch.
Yeah. good
I
catch.
had it just, I was about ready to ask.
Any other O&M questions for Kevin? Capital questions for Kevin?
I have one. I see we're cleaning Columbia, but it doesn't look like we're cleaning Swiss Village. I think we could clean that every year, but I don't know that we should. I struggle to think that we're cleaning Columbia and we're not cleaning Swiss Village, to be quite honest.
Yeah, we're gonna try to stretch that out to 2 years.
Did we do it this year?
Yes.
Yes.
It was late. It was one of those ones that, well, actually, you know, we had made a mistake on the budgeting. We had to amend it and we didn't get it cleaned until midsummer. So for right now, and even the mayor has commented on this, it's pretty clean. We'll see what the spring and the summer does to it, but the plan would be to go back in '24.
Well, I would assume that once someone's here, because we don't hire somebody local to do this, right? Don't they? Last person came out of Ohio, if I remember right. Is that not right?
Ozark Applicators is the company that we've used the most.
Yeah.
And they're from mid-Missouri somewhere.
Okay, because I was thinking about mobilization costs.
Yeah, with that, I've reached out to Lake Ozark and we're gonna try to coordinate Columbia with them. They use them as well. We're gonna try to coordinate.
So we're gonna bid this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Would you guys mind getting an alternate for Swiss Village so we can just, right at that time, at least know, we can go look at it and see what the extra cost is?
Sure.
Be great. And that is all I have. I'm sorry, Highway 42 extension. What is on water extension on?
So that's, sorry I'm taking so much here, but a lot of the capital goes through me. I apologize. I'm not trying to step on Kevin's toes, but we had found you know, one of the directives the board had given me earlier in the year was to kind of get a good handle on unwatered and unsewered areas. So we have done some pretty extensive research. Keegan Powers, our utility clerk, has helped me tremendously with this project. And she has basically audited our entire water and sewer system from one side to the other. We're still finding a few, but one of the big holes that we found is that when we did a 42 water and sewer project, I don't know, Gina's memory's better than me on this, but I think it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. At the time, there was several businesses right there along 42, right across the street from
Cemetery in the school?
The bowling alley starts and the heads on Fourth.
There you
All
go.
those on the other side from the bowling alley?
They're technically,
Bowling alley side.
they're technically in violation of our sewer ordinance. So at first I was like, well, we're just gonna make them get on. But then when I did more research, what I found out was they were skipped.
They didn't get water?
They didn't get water, they
But
didn't
the
get
school's
sewer.
got water?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a section on that side of the road, and I say got skipped, there was, short story, there were some factors, either way, they didn't get it, it is our responsibility, so we're gonna clear up that unserved area.
I had no idea we had an unsewered area on 42, I apologize.
So long story short, it all came down to an easement issue. And now 7 years later, that owner is like, oh yeah, we'll give you.
Cheryl changed his mind?
Yeah.
Cheryl changed his mind?
Yes, sir.
So, the second thing is Creek Cove Water Main Extension. So is there sewer there already?
No, sir, there's matching sewer in the sewer department, which we'll be doing next, yes.
Was it in the capital? Did I miss it? Okay.
It should be.
Oh, there it is. I didn't see it.
Unserved.
Say, unless Gina
I
forgot that one
apologize, it
too.
is there. So these are just unserved areas?
Yes, sir.
Unwatered areas. Cool, great. That's all I have.
Anything else on water? All right, next, the revenue detail for sewer starts on 73. Again, same thing with the sewer collection. Does have a little increase there in anticipation of rate increases. Transfer from CIT on sewer, 1.4 million, so it's a little less than last year. However, about 1.1 of that is contributed directly to capital because the subsidy from the debt, SRF subsidy in the debt's about 300 of that. So capital is what's to balance out the fund. We only have one bond left to pay off in sewer and cash out the 2025. So we are very, very close to that. Very excited about that. I will double check the grant revenue on this one to make sure, or the departments will re-review the draft 2 or draft 1. Any questions on revenue? All right, personnel, same story. We are not only GIS tech and municipal electrician, but we are including in addition, public works tech. And then the locator is technically funding housed at sewer as well. So those are the changes for the sewer people. Kevin, do you want to start with?
Review for sewer, similar to last year. Last year, was basically year of the bump. We went through a duplex project. We went through several major large pumps. It's going through here. Major changes. Of note that what did disappear was odor control. You notice that it was at $153,000 in year 2021, and that's now down to 0. Any questions on any line items in sewer?
One note I want to make, obviously sewer has been one of our more serious funds that we have continued problems with. And just over the last couple of weeks, and I've been waiting till budget's over to even share this with Gina, but we've had 4 pumps go out in the last week and a half. All of them are expensive. I'm going to be going to Gina and changing the forecast column because there's nothing we can do about that. That's got to be fixed. So there's the number that is forecasted to repair the system for this year was already going to require a budget amendment, and that budget amendment is probably going to be more now because we've just lost 4 pumps in 4 different locations, and I hadn't even had time to even share this with Gina yet. So just be aware that there's budget amendments coming, and repair the system is going to go up even more.
That fund obviously took a hit from sands, worth mentioning. Also within sewers, the handout for the vehicle, I won't jump to that. Here again, just much like the backer, proposing to get rid of 2 vehicles with 1 single-use vehicle that will cover basically the capabilities of the 2 that I currently have. One is a 1999 crane truck. It's got 9,000 miles. It's not a misprint. That truck is seldom used because it's only used for larger pumps. So that's not an everyday thing. So basically the truck sits most of the time and then we fire it up when we need it. So also on the slate is this 2015 F-350 service truck. It does have 75,000 miles. It rolls every day. Heavy use gets beat up every day. The pump is being told 50% chance. That's one of the trucks. We have 2 of those trucks, the F-350 there. So we're replacing both of those trucks with a slightly larger rather than an F-350 and F-450 with a crane large enough to replace that heavy crane truck that you see on the left. Also with that is increased tool storage. It'll have the compressor for air tools and assembling torch. And hopefully we get to the point where we can do PMing and we can get to the stations to do heavy rehab within house. We'll need those tools on board to do that. So getting rid of 2 vehicles and swimming down and going to 1. Any questions from the board?
Where is that 23 F-450 at? In the budget?
It's lost in the vehicle column there, 35,774,265.
Where's it on the capital outlay?
Page 76.
Yeah.
So I might have combined F-150
Center
truck.
right.
Page 76, center 2 two replacements, I might have combined
One's
the
a
two.
carryover and there's a new one.
Yeah, two are
Third line
replacements.
from the bottom, the other one.
Okay, but none of them says it's an F-450. That's why I was looking for the F-450.
Sir, I think that F-350 just needs to be relabeled an F-450.
That's what I'm saying. You're asking for an F-450, but I don't see anything in the budget for an F-450. All I see is an F-350 and an F-150.
Okay, yeah, and it could go either way, honestly. We have an estimate, these aren't, this vehicle's not ordered. We have a, and it went that way with the van.
So the F-350 is an error, it should be F-450.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's all, that's what I'm trying to track.
Kevin, you should have corralled the departments to review the draft one.
Where we're at.
We're on capital,
Any questions on water?
we're on
Sewer,
sewer.
sewer.
Sewer,
Sewer capital.
Capital.
So,
sewer capital.
I mean, I'm looking at the capital for Tantera Estates, I know LOKZ, so I see $170,000. But then I see Tantera Estates rehab of $521,000 over on this side, on page, I'll go to center 75 compared to the capital list. So, am I missing something?
Is the 520?
There's a sewer, the sewer main rehab at Tantera Estates?
So
There's three
the,
different Tantera Estates projects.
yes, there's three different. So Tantera States Rehab does have
Okay.
three particular, and then in
Okay.
this station improvement, you might find maybe some other Tantera.
There's Tantera Estates costs in the 2 million under the station
I'm
improvements?
sorry, I might have misspoke.
Maybe the better
Kevin, you
question.
may have to answer that. I apologize.
Well, the station improvements has a number of different projects in there. One of them is the one you visited, TO3. We've got money in there.
That's at Tantera, that's not Tantera Estate. You're
Correct.
I'm sorry, at
Lift
Margaret.
station improvements.
Right.
Under capital, that's in there. Tantera Estates Rehab, that's part of the Cochrane project to remedy a number of different things, but basically the sewer mains under homes. Part of that project.
Do we have a grant for that, application for that? For that portion or not?
Yeah, so if you're looking at the Tantera Estates rehab line, you've got three items there. You've got the Tantera Estates engineering inspection easement, you've got the Tantera Estates elbow K sewer design, and you've got the sewer main rehab. Those items, along with some other items that are put up in O&M, are the first four items on this list of Tantera 5-year capital plan that I had Dave provide for us, and I'll hand all these out to everybody. The next year, the only thing we're doing for the KK project, which is the first piece, is the engineering. The actual construction for that will come in '24.
So what Mike's handing out, I'm going to get the financial side of this,
For the KK portion of Tantera Estates is what I think you just said. I'm sorry, I'm asking this question first, I apologize. What- Yeah, okay, I think that's what mine said.
So this is the big picture.
That's the big picture, and so Carrie Bill and I think we
Just one
briefly
page.
talked about this.
No.
There's first few pieces that they can explain on why they're, what pieces are in this budget, how they're funded or how they're not funded. But if we bond to finish this project over up to 2028, if we were to bond, we just did some quick numbers, your principal payment would be $500,000. You took $8 million over whatever the 20-year bond, whatever was kind of standard, you would pretty much make a $500,000 payment, give or take with interest. Again, that's just quick numbers. So when we go to the rate review, knowing kind of that without, there's where you're gonna look to that area to pick that up. So that gives you an idea. Bonding, Carrie is going to get kind of a timeline and requirements, when you can bond, what it takes. It does take going to the voters to get a bond issue for sewer. My recommendation is, when we're looking at what the next few years looks like, you're gonna use your CIT in combination. Even if you raise rates, that's gonna be slowly over several years. So either way, you pay cash up front to pay yourself back, or, so we still haven't exactly what all those worked out, but you're either gonna pay cash for it, or you're going to debt it out to pay for it, and then get your money back through the users.
So I think I know the answer to the question, but do we own the Tantera estate system?
No.
We do not.
Easement work is included in that.
So is the answer no?
Yes, no, but no, we don't even
Yes,
have easements for a lot of this.
Right, we don't own it. Do we own the sewer infrastructure at Margaritaville?
Yes.
That I don't know.
Yes. Okay. So it's not under contract like
The
Tantera
states are
Estates.
different, yes, it's its own contract.
Okay, so we own Margaritaville.
We own a portion of it.
So the portion that we don't own, is it under contract? Do we know?
It is not.
We do not have a separate contract for Margaritaville like we
So
do
we
with the states.
maintain something without a contract. That's not ours.
No, no, we own the sewer infrastructure at Margaritaville.
Okay.
We own that infrastructure. There's no contract needed. We own that system.
Well,
You own up to the connection.
Exactly.
we own 5 manholes, the 20, so before that we don't. We only have easement for 5 manholes in Margaritaville, going up to Teal 03.
But we also don't maintain those other
We
manholes.
do not, no. We don't.
Okay, so I'm not sure what that is. I apologize. I was trying to make sure that I understood the difference, if there was a difference between Margaritaville and Tantera Estates, okay? So since we're under a maintenance contract for Tantera Estates, it expires in, is it
2027.
27? Okay. So what I think I'm hearing someone say is that we should potentially invest $8 million in a portion of our system that we don't own that we're under contract for.
That's
And
when
we
it's
should,
expired.
if we're gonna bond it, we would be spreading the cost across everyone in Osage Beach. Would that be correct?
No, let me correct a couple of those statements. First of all, there are portions we don't own because there was always questions on what size of pipe was theirs and what was ours. So there are parts of that infrastructure, we know this is our trunk line, that's in stations, but there are portions that they think we should be taken care of because they think it's part of our system. So there's a lot of that, and there's not easements everywhere that we thought there would be easements. I know Ed probably can give even more of a legal on when we tackled that. Second part, let me answer the second part.
Yeah, let's not get into total details.
Yeah, so the second part to that, let's just say you need to recoup $500,000 a year from users or the life over 20 years to pay for however you decide to pay for this to do up front. I do not advocate that citywide. This is a upgrade system in that area, so those users in that area, I don't believe citywide users should bear the cost of that area. Similar to SDC, so I'm gonna use the same philosophy on why and how we charge for sewer development charges. It's by section. So everything goes to the sewer line and it goes to the treatment plant. Well, we have the city divided in sections based on the cost for those users. And so if you're gonna build a new house in area 9, you're going to pay your proportionate to that upgrade to the system, and that's how. So it's, in my mind, the same similar philosophy, figuring out the legalities, if anything, if it's not just roped into the rates.
So, yeah,
He and I want to argue so much about this, but we're going to the same thing with this.
right.
So we do not own that system, nor do we have easements basically enforced that if we were to take it over as ownership, that's not even guaranteed. We're under contract, it expires in 2027. What's our legal obligations after 2027? Are we under any legal
And
obligation to continue
that
our
would be
contract
an
with the
end-
estates?
Yeah,
Your DNR we might be.
I'm just curious on the
that would
legalities
be
of that.
something that we definitely need to figure the details.
Or is it a force-hand issue that the contract expires and we're going to have to be forced to renew another 30-year contract to maintain and operate a system we don't own and we didn't install?
I do not have those answers, but that, yeah.
There's a
Brings
lot
up
of
another
other
question
questions
about
that
that.
happen, and we need to get clarity. So
There's a lot of clarity.
So
The key thing being the contract, what's our legal obligation on the contract? But once again, it expires in 2027. And we know that basically that it is a money pit, looking us in the face,
Yeah.
that we are supposed to spend $8 million to fix a system we don't own, nor do we want to own. So that's the problem I'm having
We've
with
made
this.
tons of money on this thing for all these years, and we haven't been putting the proper money into it. It's been a cash cow for the city for a long time, and now we're having to. now
Cash
we're-
cow,
I just-
let's talk about the $1 million lawsuit we got hanging over our head for one homeowner. Our cash cow is basically every individual homeowner is gonna come back on us with future problems. Basically, it's going to continue to go south for us.
I would just say that I'm not convinced that's true because I've seen some of the investments when I was on the public sewer side or the public sewer committee or public works committee.
Yeah.
And I know in 1-2 year span, and I don't know how much was the states versus quote Tam-Ter or what is now Margaritaville, but there was over $700,000 spent somewhere between 2005 and 2007. Okay, takes a lot of rates for that for profit. But that takes a long math to figure that out for sure. But what you proposed was potentially a bond, and if I understand what you just said was the citizens of Osage Beach that are voters within the city limits would have to vote to approve a bond that is focused on people that are not living in the city of Osage Beach for a system that the city of Osage Beach doesn't serve or doesn't own. Is that correct?
If the city chooses to do these upgrades.
I'm not
Yes,
ready to
and-
say I support
No,
that.
But I'm just saying, if the city chooses to do these upgrades, or any upgrades, and you wanna borrow, you wanna do debt financing, you have to go to people. So whether it was this, or we decide we wanna build a new road, the step for debt financing, bonding is a ballot, which you have a lot of nuances because this project's unique, so.
If that's the only way to get Tam-Ter Estates fixed, we need to be a good neighbor, but I would just say this, then there needs to be a special district established to where those costs are bared by those folks that live in that area.
Amen.
I thought there was some funding available, Mike, the conversation we had with Jeff about some funding available for this project. It didn't have to go to the voters.
You can do lease, but there are other layers in between, but in essence, if you take out revenue bonds, that's bond, that's balance, but for example, we're going in debt for an ambulance. We're doing that under the lease purchase laws, and so that is debt financing, but you can't go to SRF and do bonding like we're doing water sewer without a ballot. And that's how we got our SRF bonding, which is interest and subsidy. Yes, there are other methods, but if you want revenue bonds or those type of bonds,
He's referring to Jeff from
I know.
the Capital Group. And he did mention something.
There is
He
lease
did,
purchasing.
Because
and
we even said, oh, this would be something that we might be wanting to delve into more deeper for our Tan-Terra situation. And I looked on my notes today and they are not good. What can I say?
Well, the first piece, the piece that is in your budget today for 2023, that middle piece in the Tan-Terra Estates Rehab section is grant funded. That's a 7921 grant. And if we get that grant will also cover the construction piece that'll happen the following year. Now, that's just for the Elbow K area. That's where we started. That's where we have the biggest problem. And so that's the biggest piece of that. And if you go down that 5-year list, you see that we continue to kind of spread out from there after that. But those first 3 items are really keys to the whole project. If you don't do the cleaning and CCTV, the manhole inspection, and the easement acquisition, then the rest of it doesn't, you can't move forward. And I would argue that in the eyes of DNR, we do own Tan-Terra Estates. We've been maintaining it for 30 years.
Under contractual agreement though, so legally we do not own it. It's a contract agreement, basically, they're allowing us to maintain it, we never own it.
And they're paying the cost.
That's why I can wrap my head around is the fact
And
that
they're paying through the rent.
we're proposing all of this maintenance and repair work for a system we don't own. And to put that back on the people to say, hey, let's approve $8 million in cost to fix something we don't own. That's the big picture I can't wrap my head around and how we present that, what the legality side of it all is.
It's gonna be a tough sell.
And to start with, there's $600,000 in this budget that we're asking the people to share already, right here. And so my question would be, can we just, I don't know the contract. Can we just say surcharge, maintenance fee, whatever the case may be, or are we locked in?
Well,
Because if
Ed
we're locked in,
and I need to revisit that, but that was what I was gonna say. If you want to get all of these legal questions and let's really analyze it, what our options are, X, Y, Z, and what we need, before you would move forward with the first 3 or 4, however many items are in there, we can do that. We can, that way the discussion or like placehold them, don't move forward till we have these things answered, except we do have some grant money. I do agree with Mike, though, the elbow K, because of some current legal, I think that probably is very important that we do.
Yeah, well, with elbow K, that's in litigation, and we'll eventually get that matter settled. It's gonna cost us some money out of pocket, it's gonna cost you guys money out of pocket.
Before you finish that thought, if I apologize for interrupting, but why would we owe now if we don't own it?
Well, I never said we didn't own it. I'm sorry. There are,
That's what it seems to be like that people are saying.
we will get you all, we will get you guys copies of the documents. There are two issues here. There's a water asset purchase and a sewer system as well. We agreed to construct a sewer system. If we constructed it, we certainly own infrastructure we constructed, okay? In the water asset purchase agreement, there is language where we took over existing infrastructure. In other words, we purchased things, okay? I'm not familiar with the arguments as we don't own it. Okay?
Then why would there need to be a maintenance contract?
I'm sorry?
Why would there need to be a maintenance contract if we own it?
Well, Alderman Ross, I don't know who called it a maintenance contract. I just came into this,
You're not aware of that contract, is that what you're saying?
I'm aware of contracts concerning Tantera, okay? I'm not aware of contracts where we agreed to maintain someone else's property, no.
Okay.
Okay, I will get you guys, all of you, these are all public documents, Tara and I will run them all down, we'll get you all copies of all the documents. The answer to the second question, to back you up on the second issue is, in terms of the issuance of debt to fix this problem, yes, that does have to go to a public vote. In answer to your question concerning the cost distribution over the entire city versus just these folks, there is specific law that I'm aware of, I can't quote it to you off the top of my head, that you do have the right to assess different rates on service to different customers depending on their position, okay? In other words, I believe it would be completely legal to put the cost of fixing the Tantera problem on the Tantera homeowners. They bought these houses more cheaply than they would have if the process had been done correctly and the sewer infrastructure had been done correctly. The fact is, the sewer infrastructure was done sloppily, or it was done by a fellow who never intended to sell this property. And since they never intended to sell the property, 50 years later, while the heirs are selling it, we have a different issue, okay? But yes, you can impose a different rate on Tantera. The other thought, off the top of my head, Gina and I only discussed this a couple of times, but just briefly, is it'd be wonderful if we could just spin this off, okay? We let Tantera homeowners take over the thing, they can run it, they can have it. We will be happy to give them a contract to pump their sewage away, but starting at X valve, they will pay us one check. Okay, we were unable to get that done in 2009, the last time we revisited this. It's a 20-year contract that will come up again in 2020. But Tara and I will run down all the agreements. We'll get you guys copies of all those. But I am fairly confident you can impose differential rates at different parts of the city based on who's sucking up how much of time and energy and the budget is that it takes to maintain these sewers.
Which is similar to that same philosophy that we do SDCs, like the same.
Right.
You can prove the expense and tie it, it's just another cost center cog.
We get that piece, but let's go back to the ownership again, which I still can't wrap my head around, is you're stating somewhat through the contract agreement, once again, it's a contract, that we purchased it, per se. Through that agreement?
I'll read them in detail.
I think we ought to let the attorney do some research, because
I can't remember.
I think we're trying to ask him questions that he.
Okay, yeah,
He needs
that's
to
fine.
do research to tell you you're right or wrong.
Well, think back about though, if he goes back saying, yes, we actually purchased that system, well, how can we purchase something that we don't have the rights to? Because we're going back to easement issues as well. We don't have easements for all of that.
Let's see what he says, and then we'll figure out what was done right or wrong.
We don't have easements for Grand Harbor sewer line either, so.
Sure.
That's, but the only statement I would make at this point, the only statement I would make at this point is there's $600,000, if I did the math right, well, I'm sorry, about $510,000 left when you take out the $530,000 less the grant for this top 4 items on 2023 at quote Tantera Estates. The 4 items come up to $600,000, and there's about $68
Yeah.
Did I read that right? $68,000 worth of revenue?
Yes,
From
so
grant.
I'm going by the sheet on page 14, sorry.
So there's $530,000 the cost is being shared across the system.
Yes, whatever Tantera states extra specifically for their, now they do, anybody outside the city gets a higher water and sewer bill because they do not get the benefit of CIT subsidy. So they do, so
But
yes,
these are capital investments, and without, all I would say is this, I don't support at this point until we better know what we're doing here, and I don't know that I ever will support $600,000 being spread across the system to even get started. So if you want to enact a surcharge of $500 a month on all the Tantera Estates people start next month, which I know is ludicrous, okay, then we can get started on $600,000 worth of work. Okay? Just my opinion, the rest of it is completely different opinion. But that's just my thoughts.
well, there is an opportunity, and I'm just brainstorming on it, I've not researched this, but I want to do a status check of our rate review. And I will call my contact at DNR. If we have specific expenses we know we're gonna start, well, then that rate review very likely could include that other area. Just like we do, if you're outside, you have to pay higher because you don't get this benefit. Well, okay, but if you're this area, here's the project. So there's a chance, Richard, that could be looped into the first round of increases because we can base it on specific projects we know we're starting.
Okay. Just for clarity, I'm not talking about rate increases across the system, I'm talking about specific costs to the Tantera Estates portion of the system.
Yeah, so when I do my rate review, if there's specific projects we know are estimated for a specific area, then that can be looped in with all the rate changes for that area. So we could increase it potentially at that.
Add all this to your rate change estimate.
Huh? Yes, well, and that's was
There
one
you
of the
go.
documents I was waiting for. Those are kind of the things I need because my rates are only as good as the estimates that we are predicting from now to 5-10 years.
It's obviously a hot button issue.
Yeah.
But I'm not speaking on behalf of the board, but obviously we say this a lot of times. We have a fiduciary responsibility to all the citizens we represent on where we spend our money. Not to negate the issues that are going over Tantera, but basically spreading the cost of this amongst all of our citizens, I think basically is not something anyone's going to support.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure even how to sell it, stating where to make those citizens pay for it themselves that live in Tantera Estates. I'm not sure if we can sell that. It's just,
Send them a bill.
it's just.
Well, before I say,
City's in a tough
I
spot.
don't know the contract, so the contract may not allow that.
that's right.
That's-
Before I say that I am not willing to do that, I need to know some answers that Ed needs to delve in and research and tell us who owned what, when, where, and what was our obligation that our prior city not administrators, but our prior city board agreed to from 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, that we have to figure out what to do
We
with.
have to honor that contract.
We have to honor it, and then, but we also have, when I was seeing some, I won't have it, but in the oncoming 6-7 years from now, there'll be some new contracts coming through that we need to make sure that that there's some things done possibly different.
Not be redundant.
I'm pretty confident that we own it. I've read the documents. We'll see what Ed says, but I'm just telling you, I'm pretty confident that
So, yeah, so if there's a maintenance contract for us to maintain something we own. That's-
We move
once again,
forward,
that's-
so.
Certainly.
We would have rights to, would have easements said.
All right, we're gonna move to airports now. To be determined, Bob, we'll get you all the data.
A breath of fresh air, Ty.
Just saying.
Change the subject.
Lacey's mine starts on page 82.
We don't own that either.
We don't know.
You know that,
So revenues for Lacey Klein, page 83. A couple of comments on the aviation and jet fuel, and I know you probably remember this from last year. When I forecast revenue, it is directly tied to what Ty is forecasting for inventory, because as we buy fuel, we sell fuel, and there's a percentage wise. We did already discuss at a board meeting the increase this year, so it's a good. We've jumped up a lot in jet fuel compared to what we budgeted. The other things, hangar rental parking leases tied down, sell merchandise, same thing based on history. And there's really, other than the sale of something that ties capital, there is no transfer from transportation fund this year for leasing fine. Any questions on revenue? If not,
Potential revenue.
I'm sorry?
I have a question on potential revenue.
Okay, potential.
Where are we at with more hangers, Mike?
Where are we at with more hangers?
They're still in our big picture.
Well, we just renewed our aviation engineering contract, and one of the items on that contract, I believe, is the building of hangars at Lee C. Fine, but that's a few years away. This year, we were supposed to get the engineering for the runway done this year, but that didn't happen, mostly because of all of the hoopla that happened with the apron contract and the apron issue. So we're going to do the engineering. We've carried over the engineering for the taxiway. We'll do that in 2023. Then we'll do the construction of the overlay in 24. Once that's done, then we will be eligible to use our grant money to build hangars. But there's also private hangar spots out there as well. And as many of you know, I am in the middle of negotiating with state parks on the possibility of us actually owning Lee C. Fine at some point in the near future. Now, those are all still tentative, and that's all still ongoing, and there's no end in sight, although Gina and Ty and Kevin and I will be meeting with them for the first time in about 6 months here in a couple weeks. So there is some movement on that, and we're gonna see where that goes. That's tied to a lot of different things. But the answer to your question is 2025 for hangars that we build, and somewhere at the back half of this decade, possibly for private hangars.
Kevin, in the budget, and again, apologies for time, Mike, there's a master plan that we're doing for both airports, and my intention for that is not only updating ALP plans, you know, the airport layout plans, but also like what revenue generation that we're not overlooking. Eldon City Airport went through this recently, and that's how I was like, oh, we need to do that. And they not only studied about, you know, when do we do hangars, what is our next project, but they also assessed what type of hangars. You know, Airbnb hangars are very popular now. I know it's like with everything else. So there's other revenue streams, and again, both airports will be different, but it's like, okay, we not only need a master plan, but look at what other things outside the box that have maybe potential that we've never really addressed. So that's in the budget. They can say more, but that was kind of my push behind getting that in the budget.
Trying to make it more self-sufficient.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions with Lucy Fine? If not, Greg Glaze. Oh.
I do have this expense, I thought we were good revenue, so. So the
no.
question is have we got to the end of the fuel
Okay.
still yet, or are we still looking at, is there anything you feel comfortable updating us with?
Well, there's a couple things I can update you on. First of all, there's some engineering costs that are coming through that are associated with that are going to be tacked on to that. I think, was it 50,000 or 53, somewhere in the 50,000 range. There's probably another $7,000 or $8,000 that we're going to have to pay for all of the testing of the fuel that was done by our subcontractor. That's coming down the line. So we're getting close to 60,000 that, in my opinion, is owed to us by state parks. Now, I had went back and forth with state parks over this all summer long. And the most recent email that I got from them, I was told by the deputy director of state parks to work directly with the state park attorney. And so I've gotten Ed involved in that. And we are, and I know Gina wants us to draft a letter to them, you know, with a little bit more strict language. The short answer is they haven't agreed to anything, but I will say that the most recent discussions we have are very promising, because I've pointed out to them in the contract where it actually states that anything associated with the removal of the tanks that they removed right after we took that, right after we leased the property in '98, it says that any expenses associated with the removal of those tanks are the state's responsibility. And as soon as I pointed that out to the state parks, they immediately sent me to their attorney. So that's where that's at.
Nice one.
Yeah, way to
I'm
go.
sorry, Richard, I did jump when I was talking about the master plan. I
Okay.
just thought we were within the.
That's all I have to think on that. Thank you.
We'll move on to Green Glades. Revenue, same, really same spiel. I match revenue based on ties, expenditures, and history. Transfer in from transportation fund is the same as it was, and with Green Glades, it's really how to balance it. It depends on the capital, you know, the activity of the capital, and there are some carryovers in capital that affects the transfer.
So on the master plan grant, is that like an ARPA grant, or is that like an FAA grant, or
Part of the state through our grant.
DOT grant? Or it's,
FAA,
Missouri.
it's the 90-10.
okay, so it's not competing with ARPA?
Not competing with ARPA. Sometimes we can get 95, but I mean, I always try for that, but I always just budget for the 90-10.
Just wondered where it's coming from. That's all I have.
Expenses on the next page.
One comment I will make, just because I want to make sure that the board knows it's coming. We've taken a year off from fuel trucks, but we are scheduled to replace another one in 2024, so just keep that in mind as we look forward. This year, all we're doing is replacing the plow truck. In 2023, all we're doing is replacing the plow truck, but the other fuel trucks that we have are also aging. That one that we already got rid of was the worst, but the other ones are gonna have to go, and we've got them all set up for 24, 25, 26, and 27, depending upon the airport. But those are all coming.
Did we ever get our replacement for this year? Yeah.
We did.
Finally, poor Ty was about to go crazy.
And we will continue to look at the used market as we did with this one.
Further questions for Green Glades? All right, before he calls for a vote, I have one request. Will any staff members stay around to tear down the tables for first thing tomorrow? Okay.
I just have one thing before that, and I should have done this before we got to airports. I want to thank Kevin and some of these folks over here. 2 or 3 years ago, we had the biggest tiger you could ever find by trying to grab hold of that tail in Public Works, and I think we're down to maybe a bobcat, okay? But at the end of the day, great progress. It feels like there's a plan. It feels like we're trying to do the right thing. Thank you, for
Thank you.
That on the Grand Glades Capital, refresh my memory what accomplishing the power line burial does for us.
It's just safety factor.
Speak up, I'm sorry.
It's a safety factor. It's on the approach end of that runway.
I will say, sorry to interrupt Ty, that when I talked to our engineer, they're actually looking at alternatives to burying it. Alderman Becker, they're looking at the possibility of just lowering the poles. So there's a little bit of play in there. That's if we bury everything. But when I talked to Brian Hunsel with CMT, he had indicated to me that there might be a different option, a cheaper option. Obviously, we still get the 90-10 no matter what we do. on the grant, but that's yet to be determined. Some of it might not be buried.
Is the 600,000 the total project cost or our 10%?
No, we
600.
budget the total project and then the revenue is there, yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All in should, we have a second. All of those, all in favor?